How to integrate an emotional release. Today we're going to be talking about what integration is and some ways you can do it. This is comparable to when you're integrating or recovering from like a workout at the gym, right? Emotional integration. It's like, when you work out, you kind of tear the muscle fibers and they need to regrow in a new or stronger or a different way. With the nervous system and your emotions, it's vaguely similar. It's like, your emotional nervous system structure has grown in a certain way and it's maintained that way. Maybe that's, a pattern around repressing anger or a freeze response, or, there's a fawn response could come up. Again, we have these all kinds of different patterns of way we behave sort of emotionally and the way we perceive the world with our mind as well, right? And these are kind of rigid. And as you do emotional work, you're kind of disrupting these patterns. So say you repress anger and you have this sense that, I can't get angry, or other people are gonna, they'll get upset, and that feels really scary. But that inhibits you from, being yourself fully in the world. And if you actually do some emotional work to start to get in touch with that anger, you're kind of disrupting that pattern. And there can be, say there's a big emotional release of anger. What the integration is almost similar to the physical workout where the muscles have to regrow in a new way. Sort of in that space, after the emotional release, the nervous system needs a bit of time and space to reorient and repattern itself in new ways that are hopefully more functional. And they're not as much reliant on the past, because the issue with our nervous system responses is due to all the repressed emotions, the echoes of the past that we hold in our body. It's like we perceive the present moment more through our past filters of past experiences than what's actually going on. And so rather than getting like stronger like a muscle, our nervous system, it always almost starts becoming fresher, more oriented to the past, to the present, and more open and more receptive. And this is kind of what integration helps us to do. It helps us to maximize the gains from the hard emotional work that we do, and to really help the nervous system repattern in the most effective and functional way. It also gives you space to kind of restore some energy, recuperate, because it's actually physically exhausting to feel a lot of emotion. Like if you're working through layers of tension in the body, you're working through anger in particular, it takes a lot of energy. You actually just need to rest as well. You can, sometimes after I have a big emotional release, like I need a nap, you need to just lie down. And another reason of why, what integration helps to do is it gives space for cognitive and behavioral insights. So if there's a big release of emotion, that emotion was kind of cut off from you previously. That's why it wasn't integrated. It was held in the unconscious, held in the body, because it was too overwhelming or too unsafe, too threatening. And actually, when you reintegrate it and release that emotion, you almost can benefit from some of the wisdom that brings new information on board, and you can start having interesting cognitive insights into all kinds of things. You can see patterns in the past looking back. You can see insights into your current space. So take our example of repressing anger. If you feel your anger through, you might suddenly see some injustice in your current life. You might go, actually, hey, I've just realized that this person's doing this to me and that's really unacceptable. Hey, I need to tell them to stop that. Like there might be some sudden freedom for that insight to be able to come in, right? Because now you've got access to a new part of you, to new information. You're not looking as much through this lens of fear as you were before. And so new insights become available. So that's kind of some of the key aspects of integration. And again, why it matters is that if you do integration well, it helps you maximize this repatterning in the healthiest possible way. And if you don't put so much emphasis on it, what happens is you can have these releases, but they don't fully integrate. They don't fully result in a new patterning, and so you can cycle quite a lot in emotions. If you feel that anger, but you you don't quite give it the space it needs afterwards, it might tend to recycle and come up again. Or if you don't give the space, if you keep going into too much emotion without enough space for integration, you can crash. You can almost overdo it and start to like re-traumatize yourself, or it's just too much for the body to handle. It starts to get more stressed and dysregulated rather than more regulated. So this is some of the reasons why integration is so important. So when do you integrate, right? Before I get into the how, there's the when. And you can have like mini integration cycles and bigger integration cycles. And the reason this is because emotions tend to come in waves. And so if you're working with some of that repressed anger, again, sticking with the same example, you'll notice that it typically tends to come in waves. You get one wave of anger, and then there'll be it'll peak, and then it'll soften, and there'll be a lull. And then if you wait, another wave will start to come. Or if you go back, if you sort of just invoke it again, you can sort of manually almost go back into another wave of anger. And there tend to be several waves or several layers that exist within a pocket of repressed anger, if you will. And you can do these little mini integrations in between waves, and that can be really, really helpful. So you'd have a wave of anger that comes up, is fully felt, peaks, and then softens. And then you could rest there and give space to integrate. And I'll go into how to do that in a moment. So you could do it between these peaks and waves of emotion. And then you'll notice sometimes you can feel it when a cycle comes to an end. So rather than waves, a bunch of waves together is like a whole emotional cycle. It's like that whole pocket of anger then suddenly softens and it wants to change to something else. You've sort of felt that all the way through. Then you can have a bigger integration pause after that whole cycle of anger. Or at the end of like a session, if you're doing a whole bunch of emotional work with several cycles, you might want to take some time after that or the next day to integrate, right? So if you have a mini wave, you have a mini integration. If you have a bigger cycle, you have a bigger integration. If you have a whole session or a whole retreat or something, then you need more integration after that, right? And it doesn't just have to be if you process a whole emotion. I've given this example here of like a wave coming up and being fully integrated. That's difficult to access for some people. It might just have a little bit of access to emotion, and they might just be able to touch on the emotion for a moment, for a little bit, and it doesn't quite fully process through, but they're able to be present with it, and then they're able to step back. And for people who are just starting this work, or people who just have started with a fairly low capacity for emotion in their nervous system due to the conditioning they received, right? It can be really useful to integrate even that just touching on an emotion. Even that is taking new information in. It's saying, oh, I can be with this emotion for a little bit of time, and it's okay. That's the information the nervous system receives, and it can integrate that. And then the next time you approach that emotion, you'll have more space. There'll be more capacity in your system to be with it. You might be able to be with it a little bit longer. It might be a little bit deeper. This kind of thing. So integration is really important to build that capacity. You again, just like with the physical workout example, you stress the muscle, which is like reaching the limit of your emotional capacity. Then you pause and give it space to integrate for the nervous system to repattern, and then it comes back with a higher capacity next time. Just like you can, as you go to the gym again and again, you increase your capacity to lift weights. You can lift bigger and bigger ones. So how does one integrate? It's pretty straightforward in a sense. Even in the simplest sense, you can just sit there and just be open, just be present with yourself. That's kind of the simplest way of doing it. Though what I tend to invite people to do is to notice improvements in their experience of their body, which can typically be things like it feels a bit easier to breathe. There's a bit more space that you feel, or you feel a little bit more grounded, a little bit more present, a little bit more balanced energetically. So, and then whatever you notice, just sit with that for a little while. Just kind of marinate in it, marinate in the shift. So say you've just felt a wave of anger, you might notice it feels more spacious in the chest, you can breathe a bit more easily. You just take your attention there, and you just kind of rest there and just noticing and marinating in that improvement, enjoying it. You can enjoy that. Oh, I feel lighter. It feels better. And it might be quite subtle, that's fine. But that's a really good way to integrate, is just noticing what's actually shifted in your experience and just simply being present with it. And, like if it's just after a wave, you might just sit there for a minute or do that. If it's at the end of a session, you might sit there for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. If you've done a whole retreat, you might sit there for long. You might have a day of doing that, on and off. Another nuance to how you can do this is you can take your awareness across the whole body. This can be particularly useful when integrating at the end of a whole session. It's like the whole body integration. It's not just the chest feels better. It's like what feels better at the level of the whole body. You might notice that overall the energy feels more balanced and you feel more grounded, less agitated in your body, right? You've spent a whole session working through different emotions and you can just tell that things are calmer and more grounded. Again, just taking your attention across the whole body, just noticing that and marinating in it, enjoying it and staying there for as long as you like. That can be really, really powerful. You can also just ground and resource and support the body, particularly if you're feeling, you might be feeling a little bit more raw. That can happen sometimes. You've had quite an intense emotional release. You feel a little bit raw. Bring some resource to yourself. I've got videos on how to do resourcing. You can type resource or resourcing into my channel and you'll find that. But simply you could bring a bit of physical touch to the body. That can be really supportive. Just feeling the weight of your hands there on the heart. And I've got the belly here as well. You can't see it. Or just giving yourself a little hug. You could imagine a place where you feel safe. You could imagine a place that's the opposite of everything you've been experiencing. So say, you're working on this anger at an ex-partner, say that's what you've been processing. You might almost imagine what's the place that's like the opposite of that whole situation. Maybe it's a beach in Italy and you imagine yourself on the beach and just let the body settle into that and let that rawness just kind of settle in that space. Or you might imagine someone being, a supportive friend being with you. These kinds of things can just kind of ground the body, help just as a salve for the wound if we're feeling a little raw or vulnerable afterwards, right? So this is sort of in the immediate aftermath, just simply resting in it, noticing what's shifted or bringing a little bit of support to ground and resource the body are really powerful ways of integrating. Then you can support the body in the slightly more medium term. You might want to, it's helpful just to do something, give some space to the body afterwards, going for a walk, have a bath, meditate for a bit. These kinds of things can be really supportive to the body to help that repatterning. It's helpful to try and avoid screens or diving straight back into like work or some intensity. That might be unavoidable sometimes, but if you can give yourself even like a few minutes of space, that can make a big difference. Particularly for those like insights to come in. If you just really, you've got to really be patient with it. Just, you've had a release, just sit there and be patient with it. And that's when you can, you'll be surprised at what starts popping into your mind. It's like, oh, right, these little insights into how you need to change your life or whatever it might be. On that note, you can bed in those, or you can encourage those cognitive insights a bit more as well. If you want to like journal or share with other people what's been going on, share with a trusted friend, letting it percolate a little bit and jotting things down in a journal, asking some questions of yourself. What have I learned? What does this mean about my life? What does it mean about what I need to change, if anything? That can be really powerful to integrate some of those cognitive insights. In the longer term, it's helpful to do some contemplation. This is slightly different from journaling. Contemplation for me is when you have a specific question that you're seeking to answer, and it might be something like, what changes do I need to make in my life? And you sit down for like half an hour or an hour and just really just get down, just from first principles, forget everything you know and just say, what changes do I need to make to my life? Or whatever question is like, maybe it's like, how do I feel about my relationship? Could be one, right? And really contemplate this question, because the reason you need to stay with it for half an hour is because at the beginning you'll get all the froth, you'll get all the easy answers will start to go. You just go, oh, there's this and there's this and there's this, so that's obvious. But once you get those out of the way and then you start hitting a wall, when you hit the wall, stay with it a little bit longer And then after the wall, sometimes fresh insights start to come in. You'll start to realize new things about your relationship or about your life or whatever it is. And that can be really powerful. So these emotional releases can shake things up that give you access to new contemplations in this way. So that's why I recommend that. And of course, you can build your life around this, so you've got space to integrate. So if you make processing, integration like a big part of your life, you'd hopefully regularly have space, with friends where you can share. It's different, circles, sharing circles, or that you have a regular meditation practice, or that you regularly go for walks in nature. These things can help keep integrating things over time. Cool. I hope that helps. Reach out if you have any questions or comments, or you can just comment below. I do work with people one-on-one, helping them with this stuff. So please just reach out. I've got more resources on my website, on the rest of my channels, or you can book a discovery call with me to see how we could work together. See you later. Bye.